Hi everyone. In the part 1 and 2 of General Principles of Diagnostic Microbiology, we had gone through the principles of specimen collection, handling and transport in the part 1, and then the types of specimens and the collection method of specimens in the part 2. Now in the part 3, we are going to discuss about general methods of laboratory diagnosis. So these are all the steps that we have done in the part 1 and the part 2. That means sample collection, transport and handling of the specimens, and the different types of the specimens and the different methods of collection of specimens. Now this is the one, that means the sample preparation and the sample analysis or the steps that are going to be done in our laboratory. So it may be a microbiology laboratory or it may be of a biochemistry or the pathological department. So majorly we are going to deal with the microbiology department, that is methods used to identify the causative agent in the clinical microbiology. So obviously we will discuss only those methods of laboratory diagnosis. The most important and the final step in the clinical microbiology is the definite identification of the microorganisms. Different methods are adopted for the identification, which largely depend on the nature of the physician. So what type of the test that have to be performed is going to be depend mainly on the physician. And diagnostic methods can be broadly categorized into majorly five types. Microscopy, which can be of a macroscopic as well as a microscopic, then cultural and biochemical characterization, then immunological methods, then bacteriophage typing, then molecular methods. Okay, so these are all the five methods that we are going to discuss in detail now. So let's begin with the first one, microscopy, which can be of macroscopic and microscopic. Direct microscopic examination of clinical samples obtained from patients is still the fastest and most specific way to immediately augment a physician clinical diagnosis. So by this method, many infectious agents can be reliably identified with only a few simple stains and basic microscopes. So for that reason, many clinical samples may be examined in their native state under bright field microscope, phase contrast microscope, preferably as soon as they are collected from the patient. Example, we have take the stool sample may be examined directly by phase contrast microscope for evidence of certain bacterial diseases and parasites. Okay, so this is what we are going to do. Then the clinical materials, that means whatever the samples that were taken, may be slightly modified to facilitate direct observation. That means we are going to use of certain chemicals like 10% potassium hydroxide to distinguish the fungal elements. In the same manner, we are going to add the Indian ink or Negrosin stain to detect the some sort of encapsulated yeast, and even some sort of Loeffler's methylene blue is also used to wet mount the fecus for determination of the presence of leukocytes. So these are all the extra clinical materials are used to modify to facilitate direct observation. Okay, leave it. So here, coming to the examination of a stain material, either by direct clinical specimens or the samples of growth from cultures, is the most useful method for presumptive identification, that is primary identification of the bacteria. Not only for the bacteria, certain viruses, then parasites, fungi, all these are all going to be identified by a the staining procedure. So generally we are going to use the two types of stains in the microbiology for the observation in the microscope. One is going to be considered as simple stain and the second one is going to be called as differential stain. The simple stain is going to contain only addition of one dye, so that serves to delineate morphology but renders all the structures the hue, the same thing, so we cannot differentiate. So there comes the concept of differential, where it consists more than one dye added in several steps and the stain structures are differentiated by color or the shape. Okay, so along with that, in the next slide you can see these are all the different types of the stains used to have the different types of the microorganisms and the cells identification. We'll move to it. Now, the certain dyes called fluorochromes, when exposed to UV light, emit visible light of longer wavelength, and we know this property of becoming self-luminous is going to be called as fluorescence, and that principle is going to be used in the microscope called as fluorescent microscope. Now, these fluorochrome dyes such as acridine orange, rhodamine and auramine are going to be used in this fluorescent microscope in identification of some of the pathogens. And along with that, we are also going to use the electron microscope. As we know, this is going to have many folds of magnification and resolving power than the normal light microscopes. And for routine microbiology diagnosis, the greatest use of electron microscope has been found for the detection of viruses. Example, all enteric viruses can be identified in either direct electron microscopic preparations of fecal material or by we can also detect by immune electron microscope, that is immunoelectron microscope. So these are all the things that happening in the microscopy step, which is going to be considered as a presumptive identification. So here are the certain different stains that are used to identify the microorganisms. For example, check the Graham staining. So if you are going to have the pink color, those are all going to be called as gram-negative bacteria. If they are going to be of purple or violet color, they are all going to be considered as gram-positive. In the same manner, here acid-fast staining. So here you can see there is a blue and the pink color. So the pink color is going to indicate the acid-fast bacteria. Example is the Mycobacterium. And the blue color is going to indicate the non-acid fast bacteria is the Staphylococcus epidermis. So as we are going to use more than two dyes and it is differentiated in the group of bacteria, we call these stains as differential stains. Then coming to the methylene blue, which is used to stain the Corynebacterium, Tolidine, Pneumocystis, and then Giemsa is mainly used for the parasites, blood cells, and the protozoan. And here you can see the fluorescent microscope uh, screen where you can see the microorganisms, okay, showing live green, and the dead is going to be of bacteria, dead bacteria. Okay, and then Zeman is going to be mainly used for chlamydia and legionella. So these are all the different types of the stains used to identify the different types of microorganisms. Then coming to the cultural and biochemical characterization. So where isolation and identification of viable pathogens is still the gold standard for diagnosis of infectious diseases. Yes. A pure culture of a clone of identical cells have been necessary for performing the biochemical differentiation. So these two, one is the culturing methods and the one is the biochemical differentiation we are going to do. Methods used to create optimal conditions for the cultivation of pathogens have been developed over the years. And now, commercially produced environmental systems, artificial media, then cell culture lines, and then all other items necessary for the practice of clinical microbiology are readily available to the microbiologists nowadays. So here are the certain important media recommended for the isolation and cultivation of both pathogenic bacteria and fungi. So let's see the examples of some of the media like bismuth sulfide agar, mainly used for the identification of salmonella from the stool samples. And then coming to the blood agar is mainly used to identify the hemolytic streptococci. Then chocolate agar, Haemophilus and Neisseria. Then Lowenstein-Jensen agar, that is LJ agar medium, which is mainly used to identify the growth of mycobacteria because that is the only one which can be grown. So it can also be called as selective media. Then McConkie agar is mainly going to be used for the differentiation of lactose and non-lactose fermenting bacteria. Then Sabarod's agar is mainly the useful for the growth of fungi. So that is going to be the thing. Then TCBS, that is thiosulfate citrate bile salts agar medium, which is going to be used for Vibrios. Along with that, we are also going to have Cicro agar, which is going to be used for Heliobacterium pylori, and then we are also going to have Campylobacter agar, used for Campylobacter. Okay, then cysteine tellurite agar, that is Corynebacterium diphtheria. Like this, we are having several media for the cultivation of different types of organisms. So here you can see some sort of the pictures. So here the golden yellow is going to be of with the Staphylococcus aureus, and the white color is going to be of Staphylococcus epidermis. And in this picture you can see of a green pigmentation. Okay, so this green pigmentation is mainly because of the organism called as Pseudomonas aeruginosa. So if you are having this pigmentation, we can identify that it is a Pseudomonas aeruginosa. Then here if you come to the our what we call it as a McConaughey, so where you are going to have the lactose fermenting and the non-lactose fermenting bacteria. Okay, so the lactose fermenting appears in the rose pink color and the non-lactosing are colorless. And the example is going to be Salmonella and the Shigella, whereas the color giving one is going to be the E. coli and the Klebsiella. And here is the third medium, which is called as a blood agar medium. So where you can see the hemolysis of the bacteria, and that is going to be the best example is hemolytic streptococci. So this is how the microorganisms are cultured, and they are going to be identified by their morphological, that is by their cultural characters of having the shape, size, color differentiation, all those things. Okay, then moving to the important biochemical test. So we are having the different types of biochemical tests like sugar fermentation, then casein hydrolysis, and then we are having the catalase, then coagulase, then lipid hydrolysis, then gelatin liquefaction, then hydrogen sulfide production, then IMVIC, that is indole methylate Voges-Pascal citrate test, then starch hydrolysis and ureases. So out of all these things, we'll discuss few of them in detail now. Let's move. So here is the test of the catalase, where here you can see if you are having the air bubble formation, it is going to be considered as a catalase positive, and the best example of catalase positive is going to be of a Staphylococci, and here there is no such air bubble formation, so it's a catalase negative. Okay, and here comes the Streptococci, and main differentiation used to identify the strepto and the staphylo is the catalase test. Then coming to the coagulase test, so here you can see, okay, so here you can see the positive test, fibrin clot is going to be seen. So if the clot formation occurs, it's a positive test. If it is not going to have the, then that is going to be considered as a negative test. So this is also going to be used to differentiate between the Staphylococcus aureus from the coagulase negative Staphylococci. Okay, then moving to the oxidase test. This oxidase test, this is going to be considered as a positive, and this is going to called as a negative. So Pseudomonas aeruginosa gives the positive test for the oxidase positive test. Okay, then moving to the Invictus, that is indole methylate Voges-Pascal citrate test. So here you can see the negative and the positive. So after the culture, if you add some sort of a reagent called Kovacs reagent, if you get this kind of the thing, then that is going to be called as positive indole test. E. coli is going to give this positive, whereas Klebsiella is going to give the negative. Okay, so that's how you can differentiate whether it is E. coli or Klebsiella depending upon the biochemical tests, where they have given the same type of the cultural characters in the culture of the media, but in the biochemical test we can differentiate them. Then coming to the methyl red, so here you can see the whole media was going to be turned into methyl red after adding the methyl red reagent, and the Klebsiella is going to be of yellow, that means negative. And here Voges-Pascal, the E. coli is going to give the negative test, and whereas the Klebsiella is going to give the red. And even coming to the citrate test, where the green color is going to be the negative and blue color is positive. So the Klebsiella is going to give the blue, so that is positive, and the E. coli is giving the negative. So that's how, depending upon the biochemical reaction also, we can differentiate the, or we can identify the specific microorganism. Not only that, we are also going to have some sort of motility test to identify the motility of the bacterium. So the non-motile organism which lack flagella are usually going to form a single line of growth that does not spread into the surrounding area, while the motile bacterium will grow and make a hazy zone around the stab line. So this is going to be considered as a positive line, and this is going to be the negative line. So these are going to be of some certain biochemical tests for the identification of bacterial pathogens. Even the isolation and identification of viruses are also going to be done by certain what we call it as a, by observing their cytopathic effects, then heme adsorption, or by using the interference. So we can also identify the viruses by some of the tests like cytopathic effects, heme adsorption, and using interference. Okay. Then moving to the immunological methods or serological methods. The serological methods for the detection and identification of pathogens from clinical samples are easy to use, give relatively rapid reaction endpoints, and are sensitive and specific. That's the reason why we are having a more usage of these serological methods rather than the normal presumptive tests. The most commonly used serological tests include direct immunofluorescence, complement fixation test, neutralization, agglutination, precipitation test, and then immunoelectrophoretic, etc. We can have the go on number of the things. Nowadays, monoclonal antibodies are especially used in some of these techniques. No single technique is universal. Remember this one. That means no single, whatever the thing is, no single test is going to be universal or applicable for measuring an individual's immunological response to all microorganisms. So techniques are therefore chosen based on their selectivity, specificity, ease, that means how freely we can use it, speed of performance, and cost effectiveness. So based on this only we are going to perform the test. The two main important new serological techniques are number one, immunoblotting, and the second one is a liposome aided diagnosis. Immunoblotting is nothing but the best example is our Western blotting. Okay, so this immunoblotting is going to involve the paste, that is polyacrylamide gel electrophoresis of a protein specimen, followed by the transfer that onto a nitrocellulose membrane sheets or sheets. So here you can see, so this is a gel run and then it was transferred onto it, and the protein bands are then visualized by treating the nitrocellulose sheets with the solution of dye-tagged antibodies. This procedure mainly is going to demonstrate the presence of common and specific proteins among different strains of microorganisms. And this immunoblotting also can be used to show the strain-specific immune responses to microorganisms, and it is going to serve as an important diagnostic what we call as indicator of a recent infection with a particular strain of microorganism. So we can here identify the specific microorganism and as well as the recent infection that was caused by it. Then coming to the second method is a liposome aided diagnosis. A liposome is an artificially created microscopic spherical vesicle formed by a lipid bilayer enclosing an aqueous compartment, and this aqueous compartment contains a colored dye. Now what happens? The liposome is going to be sensitized by coupling a specific antibody to the liposome surface, and now the antibodies specific for the desired pathogens are attached to the membrane in a particular shape such as triangle. So here, after a patient sample is added to the test well, the analyte instantly binds to the captured antibodies or antigens. When the dye-filled sensitized liposomes are added and linked to the immobilized analyte, that is the substance that is undergoing, is going to have the formation of a triangle which indicates the positive reaction. If the sample is negative, for example, and contains no antigen or antibody related to it, so no binding occurs in the test sera. So obviously when the liposomes are added, either a blank or some other shapes appear. So but we don't get the triangle shape. So that's how the liposome tests are currently available for identification of group A streptococci and even for some sort of respiratory syncytial viruses. So this is all about the immunological methods or serological methods. Then moving to the bacteriophage typing. So bacteriophages are certain viruses that attack members of particular bacterial species or strains within a species. Phase typing is majorly based on the specificity of the phase surface receptors. So only those bacteriophages that can attach to the surface receptors can infect bacteria and can cause lysis. Okay, leave it. On a petri dish culture, okay, so if you are going to infect a bacteria and cause lysis, so here is a petri dish which is going to be lawn with the bacterial culture. Now the phases of different types are going to be taken and they are going to be inoculated. Like now the phase which is relevant to this bacteria is going to be called as bacteriophase of that concerned bacteria, and you are going to have the formation of the plagues. So on a petri dish, the lytic bacteriophages cause the plagues on the lawns of sensitive bacteria, and these plagues represent infection by the virus. So that means in bacteriophage typing, the clinical microbiologist inoculate the bacteria to be tested on a petri plate. So we have done it. Now the plate is heavily and uniformly inoculated with a cotton swab so that the bacteria will grow to form a solid sheet or a lawn of the cells. Now the plate is then marked off into the squares. So we have made into the squares. And each square is inoculated with a drop of suspension from the different phases like A, B, C, D available for typing. After the plate is incubated for 24 hours, it is observed for plagues. The phase type A is reported as a specific genus and species followed by the types that can infect the bacteria. So this is how you are going to identify the specific type of the bacteria by bacteriophage typing method. Then coming the last type of the method is molecular methods. From the past 2 decades have witnessed an amazing activity in molecular biology, and consequently significant achievements were made in the xenotyping and then identification and characterization of the microorganisms. So these developments have greatly helped the diagnostic microbiology. The applications of genome-based molecular techniques enhance the speed, sensitivity, and very often the specific etiological diagnosis. Now, the molecular-based techniques have several advantages such as they replace the growth in culture and a variety of techniques are available. Then the second one, the results obtained through these techniques, that is molecular method techniques, can be used for a variety of purpose. Then the third one, the molecular, so these are the main two. And the molecular based techniques can be of uh, used for using in diagnosing of a variety of diseases at a time. So okay, so these are all the advantages of certain molecular based techniques. Then coming to the types of molecular based techniques, we are having the two types. One is the nucleic acid hybridization method, the second one is the nucleic acid amplification method. So let's move on to the first one, nucleic acid hybridization method. Nucleic acid hybridization chemistry has ultimately paved the way for the development of probe technology, PROB. This technology has become one of the powerful molecular techniques for the identification of microorganisms of clinical importance. Okay, and many nucleic acid probes have been developed, and a number of commercially prepared test kits are being used in the laboratories. So here is going to be of nucleic acid probes are going to be very important. The principle of this nucleic acid probe technology is a straightforward and very simple. So that means what we are going to take is the genomic sequences specific for a particular group of infectious agents are selected, cloned and synthesized and used as a probe. So here you can see, because of their unique nucleotide sequence, they can hybridize only with DNA or RNA targets. So they are not going to bind with all the things, only the target is going to bind. And now once they bind with the high specificity to complementary sequence of the target, what we call a sequence of a target nucleic acid, and they are going to have the below specific levels. The sensitivity of this method varies directly with the size and the composition of the probe, as well as the nature of the original specimen. So to facilitate the visual detection and automation of these probes, we are going to usually label with reporter molecules which include some enzymes, antigenic or chemiluminescent moieties, or even the radioisotopes like iodine 131. So these are the things that we, if we want to have the visual thing, then we are going to what we call it as label those probes with all these materials. Okay, so here in the picture you can see, for example, this is the radioactive probe with iodine 131. Now the probe is mixed with the single stranded DNA from various bacterial clones. So these are all the various bacterial clones, single stranded DNA. Now the probe which is relevant to or specific to the concerned bacteria DNA is going to bind, which is complementary to it, and that's how we can find the or diagnose that thing. The main drawback of this probe hybridization is poor sensitivity, which is mainly due to the limited amount of target in the clinical sample. So nowadays, to overcome this limitation, single amplification methods are being designed to strengthen the signal by increasing the that is the concentration of a label tagged to the target nucleosides. And this nucleic acid hybridization methods are mainly employed to identify in the viral infections like HPV, CMV, HBV. Okay, so these are all the certain infections which can be identified by using this nucleic acid hybridization method. Then moving to the second type, that is nucleic acid amplification method. Predominantly, this is going to rely upon the PCR technique. What is meant by PCR? Polymerase chain reaction and PCR derived techniques. So the PCR based amplified, that is amplification techniques, have been developed and applied to the detection of microbial pathogens, then identification of clinical isolates, and then strain subtyping. So these are all the things that we are going to do. A variety of PCR versions have been developed to suit to the need. That means according to our need, we are going to have the different types of PCR techniques. Like we are going to have the multiplex PCR technique, which is used to apply for the detection of what we call as enteroviruses, and not only that, like HSV, then HSV1, 2, and VZV. And then we are also going to have another type of the technique, nested PCR, where this is going to be mainly applied to detect the Borrelia burgdorferi. It's a bacteria. In the same manner, we are going to have the broad range PCR, which is used to detect the fastidious or uncultivated pathogens. And even well known is the reverse transcriptase PCR technique, which is used to detect the RNA viruses. And real-time PCR, so here I have given you the example, real-time PCRs are mainly applied for the that is simultaneous detection and as well as the quantification of the pathogens, how much it is going to be present. So this is a picture of real-time PCR where we are having the PCR reagents, then the PCR plastics, and here are the PCR assays containing one, and you are going to have the analyzing, and this is a machine or instrument which is we call as real-time PCR instrument, where the PCR analysis is going to have the software also to analyze our results. Okay, so these are all the different methods which are used in the laboratory diagnosis, the general methods of laboratory diagnosis, which is very, very important regarding the exam point of view also. So with this, we have finished the total concepts of what we call it as general principles and diagnostic laboratory techniques. So that is general principles of diagnostic microbiology. So total we are having the three parts. In the first part, we had gone through the principles of specimen collection, transport, and handling. and in the second part we had gone through the types of specimens and then the collection of specimens, that is method of collection of specimens. In the part 3 we had gone through the general methods of laboratory diagnosis, that is what is happening in the laboratory after the collection of the specimen. Okay, so that's all about the general principles of diagnostic microbiology. Thank you.